Bruchim haboim, welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Samach Beis Amud Beis, 9 lines from the top. The Gemara is discussing various things that a woman can go out with on Shabbos, and one of those things the Gemara discussed was a tzluchi shel plaitoin, a flask of oil that is good smelling oil. There's discussion whether she's permitted or prohibited from going out with that on Shabbos. Now the Gemara Agav, that type of oil, says that the Navi tells Klal Yisrael about various punishments, and yet they are absorbing themselves in pleasurable oils. Says the Gemara, quoting the Pasuk in Amos. I'll read the Pasuk in its totality. Hashoisim b'mizrike yayin, they're drinking from bowls of wine. V'reishi shmonim yimshachu, and they are from the best of oils, anointing themselves. V'lo nachlu al shever Yosef. Says the Gemara, quoting the Pasuk, V'reishi shmonim yimshachu, and the choicest of oils they are anointing themselves with. Omer Rav Yehuda Mar Shmuel zeh plaitoin. This is referring to the oil that we just discussed before, the balsam type of oil that is good smelling. Mosiv Rav Yosef, Afal plaitin goza Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava v'lo hoduloi. That indeed Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava was goizer this amongst other pleasurable things, in order to then awaken Klal Yisrael to the terrible chorban. V'i'amris mishum tainug, and if you're going to say this type of oil was really oil of tainug, amai lo hoduloi, why wouldn't the Chachamim agree with Yehuda ben Bava that this should be osir? Omarle Abaye Ulutaimech, according to your rationale, Hodichsiv Hashoisim b'mizrake yain, that which it says in the Reisha of the Pasuk that they're drinking from bowls of wine. Rabbi Asi explains, what does that refer to? Chadamar kinishkonin v'chadamar shemizrokin koisesein zelazeh. One says it's referring to kinishkonin. Kinishkonin are tall, narrow types of glass cups with two different spouts. One drinks from one side, one drinks from the other side, where it throws the wine from one person to the next. Whereas the other one learns that it's mizrakin koisesein zelazeh. They had actually juggled a cup of wine and threw it to the other one. Rabbi Asi, achinami da osir, so it should be osir according to your rationale, says Abaye. Why isn't it osir? This was also the tainug. V'ho Rabbi Bar Avuna ikloi lebeirash galuso v'shoster bekanishkinin v'lo amar le v'lo midi. Rabbi Bar Avuna, he went to the house of the Reish Galusa and he saw that he drank from one of these glasses that have two different spouts, and he didn't say anything. Mashma, as we learned in the Gemara above, Daf Nun Del Ramad Beis, that Misha Yachol Limchois V'Loi Macha Nitpas, he's going to be held responsible if he can protest and give Toichacha, and he doesn't do so. The fact that he didn't do so must mean that it wasn't Asr. Ela Kol Mili the Isbei Tainug the Isbei Simcha Gaz Rabban. Rather, you have to say, says Abaye, that there are two requirements. There's Tainug and there's Simcha in order for it to be Asr. Avamidi the Isbei Tainug v'lesbei Simcha v'lo Gaz Rabban. However, that which has tainug, in this case the oil, the balsam oil which has tainug, it smells very good, but it doesn't have the aspect of simcha, that was not included in the Gezeira D'Rabbanan. The Gemara now quotes the following pasuk again. This is now a pasuk that Amos is then berating Klal Yisrael for their type of behavior of pleasure and self-confidence. Hashoichvin al mitois shein, they lay on ivory couches, usruchin al arsoisom, and they stretch on their beds. Omar Rabbi Yosi Rabbi Chanino melamed, this comes to teach, shohayu mashtinin mayim bifnei mitoisein arumim, that they would urinate in front of their beds, arumim, lav dafka arumim, but that was the typical situation. So therefore, that's what it's referring to over here when it says usruchim al arsoseim. To play on the word that they stretch on their beds. Sruchim, in the word, it was masriach, referring to the urination. Megadef Bar Rabbi Abo. Rabbi Abo did not like this pshat, and he scoffed at this pshat. He says, Ihochi, he proves if this is so, Hainu Dirsi, that which it says in the following verse, I'll quote the entire verse, Lochein, therefore, Ato Yiglu Barosh HaGolim. Now you shall be exiled at the head of exiled. Visar Mirzach Sruchim. And it removed the Mirzach of Sruchim, referring to the Sruchim that they were punished for. Mishum demashtinan mayim b'fnei mitoseim arumi iglu b'rosh goylim. Would they deserve such a terrible punishment of getting exiled to the head of exile because they urinated in front of their beds? Elo Rabbi Abohu elu b'nei adam shohayu oichlim v'shoisin zemze. We're referring to people who would eat and drink together. V'doivkim mitosein zu bezu, and they would connect their beds to one another. And they would switch their wives one with the other. And then they would make disgusting their seed, their semen that would go on another's bed. So it refers to Gilei Arayos. And that's the reason why they were punished with exile. Rabbi Abo said, and those others say that it was taught in the following brayso, by the following Tano. Gimel Devarim Mevinas Ha'odam Lidei Anius. There are three things that lead a person to poverty. And these are the following. The first one, Hamashtin Mayim Bifnei Mitosoi Oroim. When a person urinates in front of his bed while he's naked, again, lav davka that he's naked, but he urinates in front of his bed. The second one, umezalza b'netilas yadayim. He treats lightly washing one's hands. V'she'ishtoi mekalolosoi befonov. And the third one being that his wife, she curses him in front of his face. Says the Gemara to explain, Hamashti mayim b'fnei mitosoi orom. The first one that causes poverty is one who urinates in front of his bed. Omarav eloi omoron elo demahader ape lepurya. This is only referring to somebody who turns and faces his bed when he urinates. Aval lebroi leslamba. If he then is facing outwards, then that's not talking about that. Umahader ape lepurya nami le'amron. Even a person who does face his bed, lo amron ella le'aro. That's only when it's going to the ground. Aval b'mano leslamba. But if he is urinating in a kli, then it's also not referring to that. The second thing that leads to poverty, mezalza b'netilas yodayim. Somebody who takes light netilas yodayim, here referring to washing one's hands before making a su'udah. Omar Rava le'amar ella deloy moshe yodei klal. It's referring to somebody who didn't wash his hands at all. Aval moshe v'lo moshe leslon ba. But if he only washes his hands a little bit, with the minimum amount of water, a shear of a revis, then leslon ba, then it's not a concern, meaning it's not a problem. V'lav milsihi, the Gemara says, however, that's not so. It may not lead to poverty, but certainly not going to be something that's power, that's okay. That's going to then be positive and be okay. Domer Rav Chizda, ana mashoi maloi chafni, maya, v'yavili maloi chafni tivusa. I washed with a handful of water, and I was given, mida keneged mida, a handful of parnasa. Meaning to say that because a person was careful, he was careful to wash his hands, and be abundant with the water, therefore he was zoicha to abundance in wealth. Whereas a person is going to take the minimum of a shir revis and barely wash his hands, that it's not going to be a thorough washing of his hands, that certainly will not be considered to be something positive. The third that brings poverty is a woman, his wife, who curses him in front of him. Omar Rava al iske tachshita, is referring to on matters of tachshitim, of adornment. Hanimili, however, when is this so that she curses him because he doesn't provide her with jewelry? Hanimili hadi isle v'le'ov. That's when he has the means to buy her the adornments, but he does not do so. The Gemara now brings the following chastisement from Yeshaya Novi. Dorash Rava Bered Rav Eloi, my Dirsiv. I'll read you the pasuk in its entirety. What's written from the following pasuk in Yeshaya? Vayomer Hashem. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says Yeshaya, Yan, because ki govu b'noi Sion, because the b'noi Sion were haughty. Vatelechna netuyois goron. They walked with an upright throat, with their necks held upright. Umaskorois einayim, with gazing eyes. Holoich v'tofoif talechna. They walked with dainty footsteps. Uvragleim ta'achasnena, and their legs were jingling. Says the Gemara to darshan this pasuk. Dichsiv, my dichsiv, vayom Hashem yan ki gavu b'nois Tzion. Hashem answered because the b'nos Tzion were gavu, they were arrogant. The Gemara makes a play on the word gavu. Shahayu mahalchos b'koim zekufa. They walked with a erect type of position. Haughty, the word gavu of gaval, of high. Vatelechna, the pasuk goes on to say, netuyos goron, and they walked with their throats, with their necks being turned up. Shahayu mahalchos eke b'tzad gudal. As a result of them walking with their foot behind their heel, meaning a very slow way of walking, so that people should look at them as they walk. Therefore, they could not look down. That their throats, their necks were lifted up. Umaskorois einayim, and their eyes were indeed gazing. Says the Gemara to darshan, dahava malein kuchlo la'einayhu umeramzon. They had their eyes filled with eye makeup. To play on the word maskorois. And then they would hint, haloich v'tafuf. The pasuk says they walked. Tafuf literally means floating. Shahayu mahalchas aruka b'tzad ktsara. The tall ones would walk beside the short ones to then emphasize their height and look as if they were floating. Ubiragleim ta'achasna, and their feet were jiggling. Gemara makes a drasha on the word ta'achsana. Rav Yitzchak de Rabbi Ami melamed shematilois mor va'farsamin b'mana alehen, that they would put different types of balsam oil and myrrh of mur on their feet, that it should smell extra tantalizing. B'shuke Yerushalayim, while they were walking in the shuk. V'kivan shemegios eitzel bachrei Yisrael, when they get next to young men, boyatos bekarka, they would kick the floor, stamp on the floor. Umetizos alem machnisos bohen yetzer hara ke'eres ubekois, and then they would cause the yetzer hara to enter these young men like eres of an angry snake. This is the type of poison that they put into the hearts of these Bachurei Yisrael as they tried to entice them. Ask the Gemara, my Pirono Sehem, what was their punishments? Kidarish Rabba Bar Ula, like the Pasuk says. I'll read you the entire Pasuk as the Gemara is going to darshan it. V'hoya tachas boisem mak. In place of boisem, of sweet swelling, boisem is rat. V'tachas ha'chagora nikefes. And in place of chagura, of a belt, is bruises. V'tachas maisim mikshe karcha. In place of different types of carved jewelry is karcha, is boldness. V'tachas psigil machgores sak. In place of a sash is instead of an adornment of a sash, it's going to be a sash, a belt of sak. Ki tachas yoifi. The burn will be in place of its beauty. Says the Gemara to darshan this pasuk. And these are the punishments that were meted out as a result of this behavior of these women. Vayatachas boisem mak yihye. The pasuk says in place of the boisem was mak. Makom shayu misbas mois, the place where they would make themselves smell beautiful and pretty. Boinase nemokim nemokim. That's where then they would be decaying in those places. V'tachas chagora nikpa. In place of chagora is bruising. Makom shayu chagoros b'tziltzul. The place where they would have belts that would have bells. Nase nekofim. There would be bruises and bruises. V'tachas maise mikshet karcha. In place of the mixture of different types of carved jewelry would be karcha, would be boldness. Mokum shayu miskashtois boy naase karchim. They'll be bold in these places instead of being miskashtois. V'tachas pesigil Machgores sak, in place of the sash, which is to beautify an adornment, it'll be a belt of sak. The Gemara makes a drasha on the word pesigil, that it's pas gil. Psochim hamevim lidei gila, the openings that come to bring joy, referring to the private parts of a woman. Yule machgores sak, there will be a machgores sak, there will be like sackcloth. Kitachas yoifi, because in place of the beauty, Omarava, hainidame inchi chalufe shufra kiva, in place of the beauty is going to be sores. The pasuk goes on to say, another pasuk, I'll quote this pasuk as well, V'sipach Adonai kadkoid b'nois tzion, v'Hashem poshen ye'orei. Says the Gemara to Darshan, V'sipach Hashem kadkoid b'nois tzion, further explaining the various punishments of the b'nos tzion. Omer Rabbi Yosi b'Rabbi Chanina melamid sheporcha behen saras, that saras on their skin would develop. Ksiv hocha v'sipach, the pasuk says v'sipach, v'ksiv hasam, in the Torah it says laseis v'lesapachas, referring to negoim. The Hashem, the pasuk says poschen ye'orei, Hashem will open up ye'orei, Rav u'Shmuel. Two different explanations. That opening in the area of a woman is going to be flowing forth a ketone of blood. The Chadamar shenasu pischein keyar is going to be full of hair like a forest. Here the Gemara is making a drush on the word ya'are. Either the ya'are is referring to ya'are to pour, or it's referring to ya'are as a ya'ar, as a forest. Omar Rav Yehuda Omar Rav Anshe Yushalayim, referring to the men of Yushalayim. Anshe Yushalayim were Anshe Shachatz Hayu. They were arrogant and they spoke with hints to try to cover up their lewdness. As the Gemara now explains, Odam Oimer Lechavero. A man would say to his fellow man, in regards to illicit relations, Bameh Sadeto Hayom, with what did you have a su'uda today with, referring to relations, bepas amela or pas she'in amela, with a well-kneaded dough, a well-kneaded bread or not, referring to a woman who's a bu'ula or a woman who's a basula. Beyayin gordli or beyayin chardli, a white wine or a dark wine, referring to a woman who was white or dark or black, dark. B'masev rochev or masev kotzar. Well, did you recline on something that was wide or something that was not narrow? Meaning, was she large or was she thin? Bechaver toiv or bechaver ro, referring to whether she was pretty or not. Omer Rav Chizda v'kulam liznus. All of these words were for znus purposes. They were only hiding and hinting in a way that would cover up the znus. Omer Rachva, Omer Rabbi Yehuda, Atze Yushalayim shel kinamon. Hayu. The wood of Yushalayim was of kinamun, of cinnamon. And the time that they would burn this cinnamon wood, then the smell would then be making an aroma all throughout Eretz Yisrael. But once there was a churban, gonzo, all of the cinnamon wood was then hidden, and only a barley was left over. Migazoi de tzimtzoi malkeso, and it was found in the gazoi of the queen named Tzimtzoi.